So welcome everybody again to the Herren Project webinar on supporting teen wellness prevention tools for winter and beyond. Very important topic, especially after the current situation here. I'm in Mass, and I'm sure a lot of us are snowed in today. So I'm even more grateful for those of you that were able to show up. Thankfully, I think most of us have power. Fingers crossed. So, who is Herren Project? Herren Project is a nonprofit organization. We offer free resources and support for treatment, recovery, and prevention of substance use disorder. We were founded in 2011 by Chris Herren, who's a former NBA player. He has now been in long-term recovery since August 1st, 2008, and we are very grateful for him and his recovery. We wouldn't be here today without it. Who am I? I am the clinical director of Herren Project. I also have a successful private practice on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. I have an MSW, which I received in 2009 from Boston University. I am also a licensed independent clinical social worker, so I have the top tier of licenses through Massachusetts. I've worked in the field of mental health and addictive disorders for over 20 years now, not to age myself. I specialize in addiction, recovery, trauma, chronic mental health issues, and issues related to adolescence. I was a difficult teen myself, and coming into this field, never really thought that I would want to work with teens, but then started to and absolutely loved it, especially today where our teens are really struggling for multiple reasons. So, this is one group I really do enjoy working with. Okay. So I'm just going to turn off my camera because looking at myself distracts me before we get into this. It's not good. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So why are we going to focus on teen wellness today? So, adolescence is a critical time for emotional and behavioral development, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to start off by sort of explaining a little bit why adolescence is so difficult. We're just going to do a quick little overview, but I think it's important for us to understand why our teens developmentally struggle so much during this time of their life. Stress, anxiety, and substance use risk often increase during the winter months, and that's pretty much across the board. It's not just for our teens, but as I said before, our teens struggle a little more, during those years. So the risk is often increased even more for them. We're going to talk about early prevention and how we can reduce long-term mental health and substance use challenges if we can prevent and have early intervention. And we're also going to talk about the role that we can play as supportive adults. We can really play a protective role in their development and in helping them get through this time. And just also to mention, stress and mental health challenges, they do correlate with high risk behaviors, which is also it's also a factor already in adolescence. So it can be really important for us to understand the whys and the hows to help them, especially during these months where we're all stuck in the house. Okay, so starting off, whoop, there we go. The brain. We want to talk a little bit. I'm not going to get into all of this. I just wanted you to sort of understand a little bit of what happens in the brain during adolescence. I do have a degree in neuroscience, so this is one of my favorite topics. So I'll try not to get too in depth because I totally could. But so the areas of the brain that are, I don't want to say affected, that affect, we'll say that affect adolescence and why our teens tend to struggle. You can see up at the top, the area in blue, that's the prefrontal cortex. So that's the area of the brain where we manage impulses, we do our critical thinking. It's also the last area of the brain that develops. So you probably have heard people say that the brain is not fully developed until about age 25. This is the area that they're referring to. So the area that can mitigate impulses, mitigate emotions, and all of that, that all happens in the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala is the second area we're going to talk about, which is part of the limbic system. Okay. We're not going to talk too much about the limbic system as a whole or the hippocampus, but just to mention, hippocampus is mostly deals with memory. But the amygdala, that's the area that manages emotions. So for our young people, the amygdala is fully developed by about age 12. So as humans, we feel emotions the same at 12 as we do at 40. Okay. So we can sit in those emotions, we can feel those emotions at full strength. However, the prefrontal cortex, that area that can mitigate those emotions, that can manage those emotions, that can integrate those emotions, is not developed till we're 25. So that area between 12 and 25 is a very critical area for teens. This is the area where they need us, supportive adults, the most. I like to say it's kind of our job to act as their prefrontal cortex until they can, because they literally are unable to see the potential consequences of their behavior. And many of you that are supporting and loving um, teens understand what I'm saying. I can even understand this when I think about myself as a teen. So the next piece that I feel like is important for us to understand is the hormones. So they already have that all going on in the brain. And now let's throw some hormones on top of that. Okay. And just a reminder, I know you guys have known this, but you probably never put together the fact that the brain's never seen hormones before to this degree. So adolescents, all of a sudden, they have all of this already going on with emotions and the inability to mitigate emotions and risk and all those things. And then in comes, for biological females, estrogen. Okay. Brain has never seen it before. And what does estrogen do? Causes puberty, yes. Controls the menstrual cycle, yes. Aids in control of cholesterol, protects bones. It does so many other things. But what does it also do? Mood swings, right? And those of you that are biological female probably remember this. Those of you that are currently loving and supporting a biological female definitely know this. Um, Major mood swings. They can be loving you and hugging you 1 minute and hating you the next. It causes more intense emotional responses. So if any of you are sitting back like, oh my gosh, why is my 14-year-old so angry or so what, so the word we use in social work would be labile, but the emotions are up and down and all over the place and it's hard to keep up, right? This is why there's actually a biological reason. So the emotional center of the brain is now on fire, and that prefrontal cortex cannot come in to help mitigate that. It eventually will. And if you think back, like I remember probably in my late 20s, finally starting to feel like I could control some of that. But the teenage years, they literally can't control it. And the smallest of things can set it off. So now let's talk about biological males. What do they have? Testosterone. Again, main hormone responsible for puberty in males. It deepens the voice, creates body hair. I remember when my son's voice, who's 19 right now, but I remember when his voice just started to deepen. I was in a different room and he was on the phone in another room. And I thought that there was a man in my house and started to freak out, about to call 911 and realize that it was actually him. It's a real interesting thing as a parent or someone that loves and supports a young person to go through when all of a sudden that starts to happen. They start to get more muscular. Of course, the increase in sex drive. Um, so, what does it create in males? Aggression, mood swings, and depression. I very distinctly remember my son getting very aggressive and not knowing what was happening. Thankfully, I understood this. So I was able to sit him down and when times were good and explain to him what was happening, that this testosterone was coming in and it was getting to that amygdala and it was causing these intense emotions that cortex cannot mitigate. So there is literally biologically a loss of control in some moments, and it can be scary. But what was helpful for him is when I gave him the understanding of what was happening, he was able to then say to me, Mom, it's happening again. It's happening again. I don't know why I'm so mad. And we were able to sort of take a break and regroup. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to show up for our young people in that way further on in the webinar. But I felt it was really important for us to understand what was happening, right? And the bottom line is, teen midbrain is literally wired for very strong emotions by age 12 without the full ability to mitigate those emotions with that cortex until around age 25. So please, please, when you think your teenagers have lost their minds, understand that this is biological. Okay, they don't mean to be as difficult as they are. They're literally biologically wired to overreact and to have very strong emotional response. So what does this leave our teens vulnerable to just on a good day? Peer pressure, bullying, depression, anxiety, self-medication, right? So all of these things are already, which all of you know, I didn't need to tell you this, but all of these things are already a potentials. They're a high risk demographic, right? Um, so when we throw winter in and potentially 2 feet of snow, like we're in right now, and the inability to leave the house and stuck in with our family members and all these emotional responses are going on, and as loved ones, we get frustrated and potentially angry because we don't understand why they're reacting the way that we are, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. What does that look like and why does that happen? So why can winter be even harder on teens? Reduced daylight. Hopefully most of you know that daylight is it very much affects mood. So the seasonal affective disorder that we hear thrown around often, it's actually a real thing. It's a real diagnosis, but I think there are a few of us that don't have a negative reaction to the reduced daylight. It really can create feelings of tiredness and most of us, we don't socialize as much, so we stay in the house more. I know I could be in bed at 8 o'clock in the winter when I can be out spending time with my loved ones until 10 in the summer. The difference in energy is huge. So that happens to our teens as well. Routine changes, what we're dealing with right now in Massachusetts. Tons of snow, so my routine has been very different. We have the increased academic pressure after break. Look forward to break, but then realize they have so much they need to catch up on after break. That can create an immense amount of anxiety. And I also want to mention the pressure that our kids just have on themselves today academically. I'm sure that there are many of us that did that to ourselves when we were younger, but I don't feel like the school systems were as pressured as they are today. The pressure to get into colleges, the pressure to do tons of extracurricular activities. So that is also leading to some of that anxiety that they're having. We already talked about social isolation. Physical activity is a really important part of wellness. It creates endorphins. It's our body's natural antidepressant. So when we're sitting around watching on screens all day, definitely going to feel worse. And we already talked about the seasonal mood changes. So what can we do, right? What is prevention? So prevention focuses on strengthening skills, not responding to a crisis. Oftentimes we find ourselves in a crisis and then having to jump in and figure out what to do then. Prevention focuses on trying to increase skills before the crisis happens. So it's not reactive, okay? We're trying to hit it off before we get to that point. Prevention hopefully will build resilience before the challenges escalate, which is, part of what we also really need. Sorry, my phone just rang, so I thought I had it turned off. Let me turn that off. There we go. Um, Helps teens develop healthy coping strategies, and that takes us through life. We really need coping strategies, especially today. I think it's something that we've kind of lost, and we'll talk about that more in future slides. And it encourages help seeking and connection. We know that connection is one of the most powerful prevention tools that we have. And it can be very difficult to connect with our teens for multiple reasons, including the fact that they're also trying to differentiate from us. So it's kind of their job to pull back. So we're going to talk a little bit about when that's healthy, when that's not, and what we can do and how we can try to figure out the difference. So why does early recognition matter when our teens are struggling? It leads to better outcomes. We also need to realize that small changes can signal bigger struggles. So, not to overreact if we see change. Adolescence is a time of major change, but to know that it's okay to ask questions, even if it upsets them, and how to manage that, right? That's an important part of loving somebody in this age group. Intervention does not have to require certainty. Concern is enough. So please remember that. You don't have to know if your child is having problems with stress, anxiety, depression, drugs and or alcohol in order to ask the questions, right? And please trust your instincts and stay curious. And I put not accusatory in big letters because that's so super important. Oftentimes, as those of us that love young people, we're scared. And we have these conversations with them in the middle of our fear reaction, which is very valid. Okay. When you love somebody that's in this age group, it's scary. So we will oftentimes react in our fear, which is when we're not in our wisest mind. So we have to get ourselves, step away, get ourselves into a better place, and then have the discussion. And we can't be accusatory when we do it, or they're never going to talk to us again. Okay. The key to this is not expecting your teen or your loved one to not never make a risky decision. The key is to get them talking to you about it. The key is to become a safe space. Very, very difficult. Okay? Let's see. So some of the warning signs, I think we're going to go over this again in a future study, but I mean, a future slide, but I want to get them out there. Okay. Mood swings or withdrawal. So when you're a teen, you see the mood swings, which I know we already talked about, they're already there. Okay. So it is difficult to determine when it's just normal and natural and when it's a warning sign. If your gut's telling you something, just start asking questions. You don't have to know. When they're completely withdrawn, they're going to withdraw from you. They are going to. Okay. That is part of this age group. That's okay. If the withdrawal becomes really scary to you or is signaling something is off, again, ask the questions. When grades start to decline, or there's a loss of interest, and or if there's a loss of interest in things that they used to love or friends that they used to spend a lot of time with, that is just it's a red flag. Okay. This is not, there's definitely a problem, but it's a red flag to start asking questions. Changes in eating or sleeping, changes in friend groups, that can be a big one when it comes to substance use. So notice it and ask the questions. And a lot of secretive behavior. Like, let's just be real. Adolescence is a time of secrets. It is. I remember it. I didn't want to tell my parents and my loved ones everything. But certainly, if it's to a degree where you feel like you know nothing about them, the red flag, and we need to ask some questions. Okay. So, what do we do if we start to see some of these things? And I put this in here because I feel like all of us, this little cartoon, I thought I never told you to leave the house without your helmet caps. Right? We have these trackers now, which actually makes me very nervous, but I can't stop looking at them. Even though he's 19 and away at school, I still can't stop myself from looking at it. I wish I could wrap him in bubble wrap and make sure that he was always safe and always know where he is. But that's not, it's just not realistic. We absolutely can't. And we have to kind of lean into it and allow them some freedom and some space to make their own decisions and become who they're going to be, but with a safety net under it. Right? So how are we going to do this? We're going to recognize any major changes in behavior as soon as possible, right? And then we're going to ask questions, which leads us to creating open communication. We know most of our teens do not want to openly communicate with us, right? So it's really important, and we're going to talk about this again in a future slide a little bit more in depth, but really important that we go into these conversations asking why, and we listen without judgment. And I put in there harder than it sounds because of that fear that we sit in. So we want to end up, and I remember these things being said to me when I was a teen, like, what's wrong with you? Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? Right? And those reactions are fearful. They're fear-based. We just want to kind of almost sometimes bully them. And I'm not saying all of us do this, but I know myself, even knowing this, have an instinct to be like, just stop it. Like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do that? And that's out of my fear. And all that does is put a barrier in between us and the teen that we're trying to support and love. They're not going to come to us if they feel judged. So the goal is not rainbows and unicorns, you guys. We're never going to be perfect. We're too emotional to be perfect. But the goal is being able to sit in it and not judge. And I'm also going to tell you a little trick that I use. If something is scaring me that he's telling me, I tell him. I say, you know what, bud? I love you. I need a break because I'm really frightened by what you're telling me right now. So let's take 10 or 15 and let's come back so I can get myself in a better frame of mind. I will ask for space. It's okay for them to know that they've scared you, right? But you have to make sure that it's followed up with, but I'm not judging you at all. And I understand that this is a difficult time and these are difficult situations to navigate. Right? Number 4, and I can't stress this one enough, No parent wants to hear it, but it's so important, or parent or loved one wants to hear this, but it's so important that we understand this and we sit in this and we try to come to peace with it. We need to work towards accepting the fact that our children are separate beings and we cannot control their choices. You have to let them make their mistakes as much as that scares you. Your job is to be there with them to help them figure out the mistake on the other end. Now, of course, I'm not talking about behaviors that are life threatening. That's a different story. That requires more intervention. But in the regular sort of teenage, I want to try alcohol, I want to try marijuana, I'm going to go out with my friends tonight, I'm going to not make curfew, like the parts of adolescence that are, hard for us to deal with, we have to understand that they are becoming an adult all in themselves and that they have a right to make decisions for their own lives. We also have a right to have it scare the heck out of us and, to have it break our hearts. And that's how I always have approached it with my son and the other teenagers in my life that I love is you have a right to ruin your life if you want to, but it will break my heart, but it is your right. And I hate having to say that. I wish I could take that out of loving an adolescent, but I can't. It is part of it. So the more that we can kind of take that, like, this is your life, you get to make this choices, but these are the things that I see that scare me, because these are the potential outcomes that you could end up with as a result, as a consequence of these choices. That is you acting like the prefrontal cortex. And if you're judging them, they're not going to give you the space and time in their life to do that. And you might not always be, we're going to talk about this too, but you might not always be their person. You might be too afraid. They might be too afraid they're going to disappoint you in some area. So make sure they have other adults in their life that are trustworthy that they can go to talk these things through if you're not the person. I'm not the person for my son for every single decision that he's made. Thankfully, he does have other supportive adults in his life, right? So we have to be accepting and understanding and help them create that support system of people that they can go to when they have a question or a struggle or an issue that aren't necessarily us. And that does not mean you have failed. Okay. What that means is you have done your job really well. Okay? So, how do we create this open communication, right? This is one of the toughest things to do with our kids that we love in general, even more difficult during adolescence because they don't want to talk to us, right? This is when they want to pull away. So what we need to do is create open communication. We have to start having these conversations early and have them often, okay? We need to initiate conversations about stress and substance use early and often. When we're doing this, we have to use a calm, non-judgmental tone. So if you're angry, don't have the discussion right then and there, right? This does not have to be solved today. I know have always felt, especially with my son, there's a part of me that just wants to talk about it now because I want to hear that he's never going to do this again and that he's sorry and that I want him to take that fear away, right? But that's not his job. It's my job to learn to sit in that anxiety and be able to manage that anxiety and then be able to come back and have a conversation with him in a calmer, non-judgmental way. Okay. And again, please don't feel bad if this is stuff you haven't been able to do up until this point. I know this stuff, I teach this stuff, I still struggle with it. So it's okay to make mistakes. When you do, go back and apologize. I had to do it many times. I'm sorry, bud. I reacted in fear. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Let's talk now. I'm in a better place. Okay? What this is going to do is create space for teens to share without judgment what you want to be. Okay. You want to be the space for them to share without judgment, right? If you've had a few too many drinks, I'll come and pick you up no matter where you are or what you're doing. I will not ask one question until the next day when we're all in better space, right? That's what the kind of environment we all want to create, right? There's always has to be the follow-up conversation. Doesn't have to be in that moment. Focus on understanding, not fixing. I'm a fixer. I came into this field because I'm a fixer. This is hard for me, right? But I have to let him fix his stuff. because I never want him to do it again. So if he makes a big mistake, my job is to say, oh man, wow, you really got yourself in it this time. So what are you going to do next? And I can help him figure that out. I want to help him figure it out, but I don't want to be the one driving the bus. I want him to come up with the ideas. And then I want to walk beside him as he's mitigating these consequences, not in front of him, right? The old bulldozer parent. We don't want to be that. We want to teach them the skills for life, right? We also want to teach them that any decision potentially has a consequence. That's the prefrontal cortex. The more we do this with them, the stronger their prefrontal cortex is going to become. Okay? And keep in mind, I should have said this earlier, it's not fully developed till they're 25, but it develops along the way. So it's not like the 12-year-old version of them is the same until they turn 25. That prefrontal cortex is going to continue to slowly develop until 25 when it's fully cooked. Um, Other thing I want to mention, be ready for answers you don't want to hear if you're going to do this and you're going to create this open communication, okay? You got to be ready to hear their answers. So you have to be prepared. And again, it's okay to take a break if you need to. It's okay to say, wow, that one was tough for me. I'm going to go get a drink, going to go get some water, not alcohol. Going to go get a drink of water. Um, and we'll reconvene in a few minutes because I just need to think about this for a second. So you don't react in anger. If you find yourself reacting in anger, right when you catch yourself, stop and be like, wow, that really scared me. I feel myself angry, so I'm going to take a break and we'll come back once I feel a little better. I'm not judging you. I'm just scared, right? Make sure you delineate between the two because oftentimes we think we're just angry, but we're not. We're scared. If you actually think about the root of why that anger is there, it's fear, right? It's fear that something bad's going to happen to them. It's the idea that you yourself are the ones who are in control of all of their decisions, right? When in reality, you've already done your job in that area. Now you just have to support them through who they're becoming. Um, Helpful conversation starters, right? You seem stressed lately. You want to talk? And if they say no, it's okay. You can say, okay, but just know I notice something seems off and I love you and I'm always here and I won't judge, right? What has been will be the hardest part of your week? Specific question. My son, there are times where he'd go, oh God, mom, stop. And I'd be like, okay, bud, but I'm really interested in you. And I just want to know that you're okay. And I want you to know that I'm here, right? About what can I do to help? You seem stressed. What can I do to help? I love you. Really important. You're not alone in this. I don't like what you did. I don't like what you said, but you're not alone. And I love you. I'm always here. Right? Here's another one that's not on the slide. What's one thing that's been tough for you lately? Right? It's kind of like what's been the hardest part of your week, but in a different way. So asking these kind of questions, and by the way, you can find all of these. I can send the slides out if you want, and I think this is definitely going to be recorded. So if you want it, the recording after, you can get it. But these are all things that you can find right in Google. You could probably get 100 of them if you just put in helpful conversation starters with your with a team. They're all there. We also do have brochures for every age group that we have on the Herren Project website for free. So it's kind of like how to talk to, we have elementary age, how to help your teen. We have both versions of it if you want to download it. Okay, so next. So what if they have already made a poor choice, right? What do we do? What if we get all this information, we get them to open up to us and they tell us something like, yeah, I'm really scared. I've been smoking marijuana every day or using marijuana gummies or vaping marijuana or whatever every day for the past year, right? And you had no idea. What do you do then? And this one, by the way, I just want to point out, I got to give our founder, Chris Herren, credit for because he's the one that came up with this many years ago, and it has helped me so much in my practice professionally with teens and with my own son and my own family member. Just ask why. Try not to get into the what have you done? Are you crazy? Judgmental place. Just say, oh my gosh, why would you do that? Why don't you love yourself more than to do this? Right. And Chris actually does a great job in his documentary, The First Day, with explaining this and talking this through. You can get it for like $9.99 a showing right on thefirstday.com. And he talks so much about this. And I highly suggest if you can, if you take the time, especially now where so many of us are snowed in, to watch that with your team. It can really start and open up dialogue in a way that a lot of other things can't. He does a really great job. And by the way, I'm not plugging this because I get royalties. I'm plugging it because it's really a great documentary. It's his talk. It films him in his school talk from beginning to end in various school systems. And I cry every time. So, and we also do offer it as free screenings here through Herren Project fairly frequently too. So go look at our social media and watch out for it because we do it, but we do play it fairly often for free. So why is asking why so important, right? Let's talk about this and how to do it. So we always need to do it with love. That is the most important part of this. Please don't do it in anger. If you feel like you're going to do it in anger, I am going to beat this one, like the old adage, I'm going to beat this like a dead horse. Don't do it when you're angry. These conversations need to take place when you have processed your feelings. Go to your support system, process it out with somebody that you trust, somebody that also is not going to overreact or react emotionally. And then get to the place where you can have a conversation with love. Okay. So what do? You listen, even if you don't like what you're hearing. You don't overreact. Okay. Admit that you cannot control their choices or behavior. Please admit that to your teen. I know you don't want to, you feel like a lot of you probably feel like that's relinquishing control. You already don't have it, right? Especially if they're coming to you finally disclosing risky behaviors, or you figure out that they're engaging in some risky behaviors, the control already isn't there. So now what you want, I mean, your control already isn't there. So now what you want to do is become a safe space for them to come to figure out how to change it, right? And the best way to do that is to admit to yourself and then to them that you cannot control their choices or behaviors. Every one of our young people know this already, right? You don't want them to capitalize on it. You don't want them in a space where they're like, F you, I can do whatever I want. You can't control me, right? You want them in a space where they're like, oh man, I just did that. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I'm here. I got to call my parent, loved one, guardian, sister, brother, teacher, right? That's that's where who we want to be. That's when we make the biggest impact on our youth. Be compassionately honest. So that means with compassion, say, this really scares me. This really hurts me, right? Please don't say disappointed. And I only say that because a lot of our youth hide things from us because they don't want to disappoint us. And I always tell my son, that's not his job. My disappointment is for me to own. It's not your job to fulfill my needs, right? It's your job to make the best decisions that you can for yourself, right? So try not to use that word even when you feel it, just because they're already afraid of that and it already keeps them from reaching out to us. So let's not highlight on that. Being compassionately honest about the fear that you have around a decision, the sadness you have around the decision, the potential consequences that could happen around it, right? I will often say to my son and to a lot of the other young people who I speak to, I know you're probably going to roll your eyes at me when I say this, but I feel like I have to say it out loud. So please bear with me. And then I educate. Right? So it's okay for them to be annoyed with you and make it okay, right? But they still hear you, even if they hear you through annoyed ears. If you are non-judgmental and you're compassionate, right, and you're not making this about you, they'll be more likely to hear you. Again, take some space. If you're not in a good frame of mind, this is not the time to have the conversation, and be honest about that. We're going to have to come back to this later. I need some space. And then the last one on the do's, make the punishment fit the crime. And what I mean is any consequence, I don't like the word punishment, it's just for effect, but I usually use the word consequence. We want the consequence to fit the action, right? In real life, if I drive under the influence, I lose my license. That consequence fits what I have done. I'm not safe on the road, right? But if your young person, say, blows off curfew, right? And you're like, I'm done. I'm taking away your video games. It doesn't fit. It doesn't track, right? If they didn't come home for curfew and you take the video games, there's no, that doesn't line up. So they're going to feel like my parents are just trying to hurt me. My parents, my loved one, my guardian, they're just trying to hurt me. This doesn't make sense, right? You want it to make sense. So for me, it would be if my son blew curfew, which thankfully he didn't do very often, but the one time he did, and he didn't answer his phone, I was like, okay, well, you're not going to go out, and for the next week or so, because now I'm anxious because I had to sit in my anxiety of wondering if you were okay. Um, and you could have been hurt, and I wouldn't have known. You didn't answer your phone, so you're not going to leave the house for the next 2 weeks, right? Because we need a break. So trying to make it make sense to them, I also would involve him in his consequences. So what do you think? I'd be like, okay, let's take some space, and I want you to take that time to think about what you think the consequence should be of what just happened. And you'd be surprised when you invite them into that, some of the things that they'll come up with, right? Especially if they don't feel judged. You'll get some consequences. Sometimes I got some from him that were more severe than what I actually would have given him. Right? So it's a really good way to sort of involve them in the discussion and to create trust. So we've gone through a lot of these already, but what do you want to try to avoid? Overreacting, judging, blaming, shaming, jumping to conclusions, or like we just talked about, punishing for the sake of punishment. That jumping to conclusions thing, be careful with that. I do it too. None of us are perfect in this as parents, but not allowing them the space and time to explain and to talk to you before you start telling them what they did wrong or assuming things. Let them talk first. Okay, we're going to talk about that part in a second too. So next, we're going to talk a little bit more about the early signs of issues, right? That there could be something wrong. So early signs of stress: increased irritability, sadness, or emotional withdrawal. Oh, there's a typo there. Sorry about that. Changes in sleep, appetite, or energy. We've gone over these already. Loss of interest in activities they once enjoyed. Trouble concentrating or declining school performance. Major changes in behavior. For substance use, it's secretive behavior or increased isolation. Risk-taking or impulsivity, defensiveness around questions about activities or mood, and major changes in behavior. Right? So I wanted to bring this back again after we talked about it a little at the beginning, and I'm bringing it back now because I really want you to take a look at these. And again, wanted to reiterate that these things are going to be some of the things that are sort of a normal part of adolescence. And then there's going to be the warnings, and there's a very fine line between the two. So please don't assume that you have to know the difference. If something in your gut is telling you that any of these things are happening and it feels to you like there's something wrong, right? Remember, what are we going to do? Right there. We're going to ask the questions why. We're going to ask non-judgmentally. We're going to sit in it. We're going to be ready to hear what the answer is, right? And we're going to allow them a safe space to work this out, and we're going to sit beside them with any potential consequences. Okay? So I want to move on to, what do I hear from teens that they need from us? Right? So what did you, and I want you to think a little bit about this, because I've spent a lot of time in the last few years thinking about what I needed when I was going through this, when I was in this phase. I was a really sad, difficult, I don't want to say anxious, more depressed teen, right? So what did I need? Right? So consistency and emotional availability. We got to be able to sit with them. We got to be able to listen to them, right? We have to be able to control our own reaction. because they do want to tell us, but they're scared. They want to be able to talk to us, but sometimes we don't make it easy for them. I know I have done that with my son sometime, made it difficult for him to tell me things. So again, I don't want you to judge anything that you've done, any mistakes you may have made. It's part of it, but I want you to try to do it differently and have this be your goal in the future, right? Consistency, emotional availability. They need clear expectations set with compassion. So we got to tell them, no, you got to be home by midnight, right? I love you too much to allow you to stay out during a time where it could potentially be dangerous, right? With compassion, not with judgment. We need to anticipate that our young people are going to be curious about what happens in the world after 10 p.m. We have to anticipate that our young people are going to be curious about alcohol and they're going to be curious about various kinds of drugs that their friends start doing. I want you to tell your loved ones, your teens, that it's normal for them to be curious, right? Not that you're telling them it's okay to do it, but that what you would like to do is be a sounding board for them to talk about their curiousness and that you're not going to judge them. And of course, you don't want them to do it, right? But also knowing that if they can sit and talk to you about the thoughts that they're having, you can then give them all the information on how to stay safe. I always made sure my son had fentanyl strips. To this day, I don't think he's ever taken a pill, God willing, but he has the strips because he's 19 now and he can make that decision and I won't know about it. So I want him to have it to make sure he's safe. I never co-signed that though. I've always said it's a really bad decision and this is why. But if you ever find yourself about to, please be safe, right? So validation and normalization of difficult feelings, we have to validate them. Even when they sound, what they're telling us sounds insane, you have to be able to be like, okay, I see how you got there. However, and then we educate, then we act as that prefrontal cortex. Then we start to say, but have you considered this consequence of that choice? And what will you do if that consequence comes? Right? That's what our adult brains are capable of doing, that theirs are not. They're not biologically not able to do that right now. We need to help them with labeling emotions. They're feeling these emotions so intensely, half the time they don't even know what it is. So you appear angry. What does that feel like? Right? Maybe not what does it feel like when they're still angry. You can wait till after, but you seem angry. Do you need to take some space? Why don't you take a walk? Right? You seem really sad, right? Like helping them label the emotions. We got to give them a safe space to make these mistakes. We have to. We can't provide them with the level of protection at this point we wish they can. We cannot protect them from themselves, right? So we have to give them a safe space to make mistakes. We have to give them a person to call, whether it's us or somebody else. We also really need to model healthy coping. So if you don't have coping skills, if you feel stressed out all the time, if you find yourself coming home after a hard day of work and smoking a joint or drinking a glass of wine or cracking a beer, they see that. And I'm not judging you for your choice, right? But doing that outside of where they are, and also maybe even acknowledging to them that there is a health, that's not the healthiest choice. We all can agree that substance use is not the healthiest form of coping, right? So talk to them about it and say, hey, listen, this has been my go-to and I need to find something healthier. So why don't we try to find some things together and involve them in it? Let them see that you know you're not perfect. It's going to make you so much safer to them if you're willing to admit that you yourself are also an imperfect being and that you're willing to change, right? That can be huge for making us safe adults. Okay, so what can we encourage for healthy coping strategies? Let's see, where am I? Okay, I think I'm getting to the end. Yeah, okay. I think we're doing okay with time. Um, Physical movement, endorphins. I mentioned those earlier. They're so helpful for all of us. Time outdoors, sunlight. We already talked about how that is really, really important in terms of mood. Creative outlets, music, art, writing, all of those things give our brains a break from stress and anxiety. Then, of course, there's the biggies, mindfulness, meditation, grounding techniques. If you yourself haven't found any of those that you like, again, do it with them. Be like, hey, I think I need some more healthy coping skills in my life. You want to do some, like, practice some stuff together? There are times in my son's journey through adolescence where he would say yes and times where he'd be like, no, thanks. So if he says no, thanks, that's fine, right? I'll do it anyway. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, remember how I was telling you about this? Well, I tried this particular one that I found from Googling, and it was so helpful for me. Just tell them about it. That's all you need to do. You don't need to push them to do it, but that's that modeling piece that can be helpful. Journaling or reflection. This gets anything that we're struggling with, getting it out of our head and onto paper. There's something about it that integrates it and makes it easier to move on. Right? So it's another way of kind of dealing with difficult emotions, processing those difficult emotions and being able to move past them. Another thing that's great to model, asking for help. And again, even if it's not from you, it's okay that they didn't ask from you. Please don't take it personally. Sometimes it means that they love you a lot and they're too afraid to disappoint you. And that doesn't necessarily mean you've done something wrong. Regular sleep and meals, something we need to model, right? Balance between work and play. This isn't happening for our kids the way that it should be. So unfortunately, a lot of them are aiming for 4.5 GPAs, 4.8 GPAs. In my time, I don't even think that existed. So this is really, really important for you to tell them and show them that it's okay for them to want to play a little too, and that a healthy person has an equal balance of both. And then routines. If you have an anxious young person, helping them create a routine that they can follow can help create a sense of control and it can bring that anxiety down. And also for that one too, watching the same shows over and over again can be very helpful for that because you don't have to anticipate what's happening next. So it can bring down that anxiety. Okay. Um, and I just want to mention that connection is a major protective factor when it comes to risky behaviors, substance abuse, mental health issues. And connection doesn't it means you, it means friends, it means being a part of a club, right? So any kind of connection that's healthy, you want to encourage. Right? So teens thrive when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they belong. By the way, this isn't just teens, this is all of us. We all want to feel seen, heard, and valued, right? So all of what we've talked about today is going to foster this with you and your family, but also encourage them to be a part of other communities, right? It can't, especially healthy communities, obviously. I also want to point out that one trusted adult can make a huge difference. We know this from science studies. All it takes is one trusted adult that can change the trajectory of a child's life, of a young person's life, right? So if you're in a teaching profession and you're here today, just know that you do matter and you can really make a difference in a young person's journey. And connection matters more than perfection. Sometimes as parents, and that fear, we kind of vie for protection or from them. That's what we want. We sometimes set the bar a little bit too high because we want them to be all the things, successful. We want them to be able to take care of themselves. We want them to be proud of themselves. And we know how important that is to be, I don't even want to use the word happy, but a content adult. Sometimes we take it a little too far. So please always remember that you can't be both perfect and happy. You have to choose one, right? So if you're going to put your energy towards something, pull back on the 4.0 and put a little bit more time into encouraging connection and play. Because you can't have a content, successful adult without a little bit of that as well. And ways, just a couple more suggestions on how to create connection. Shared meals, check-in rituals, right? My son and I, now that he's at school, we talk every morning when he's on his way. So that's a check-in ritual that we have. Participation in group activities, we talked about that already. Club sports, any walking groups with friends. If it's positive friends, encourage study dates and movies and things like that. And getting involved in your community. We all feel better when we feel like we're a positive member of our community, and encouraging volunteerism and things like that can be very helpful for our young people. Um, Let's see here. And another very important slide is persistent is when to seek additional support. So, at what point do you reach out for a therapist to potentially work with your teen or you? At what point do you go to the school and say, "Hey, I think I need some more support"? What point do you go to the pediatrician? Um, I'm going to tell you that whenever you're considering, it probably is the time. So if you're considering reaching out for additional support, then you need it and do it. That's why we're here as an industry, is to help and support you. Provide your young person with support in the best way that you can. You're not supposed to be an expert on this. This is why there are people who have spent many years studying and learning how to do this. So please don't hesitate to reach out to them, right? If you're seeing persistent mood or behavioral changes and it scares you, reach out. If you see escalating substance use, don't wait, reach out. Okay. It doesn't mean that they're going to end up going to treatment unless they need it, which then I'm going to say, let that happen, because we have way too many people right now struggling with addiction and you want to head it off at the path. So don't fight that. Let the system help, right? Um, but if you're not sure if it's escalating or if it's negative, or like, well, obviously it's negative. If you're not sure if it's escalating or if it's really creating a problem for them, reach out for help. Like, nobody's going to put them in treatment without your consent. You can ask the questions. If you see a lot of withdrawal from relationships or daily activities, that could signify depression. We want to head that off at the pass, right? Any talk or participation in self harm, please reach out for help. Self harm to me is no different than substance use. It is an addiction in itself. And you don't want to be the one determining whether or not this is suicidal ideation or self harm. You want a professional to do that. And there is a difference. Just because somebody is self harming does not necessarily mean they want to die. But I don't want you the one making that assessment. So reach out and ask for help. Okay. Any appearance of hopelessness. You're a young person, just feels hopeless in their life, and your family needs additional support, right? They need additional support. I also want to throw out there that I am very acutely aware that a lot of our kids don't want the help. So you'll mention it and they'll just shrug it off. Go see somebody anyways. Go to a family counselor, get some parent coaching. I've done a lot of this. It's very helpful to the family to have somebody who understands this stuff helping you figure out what your next move should be, potentially helping you figure out how to get them through the door, right? And oftentimes, our young people will go with you if they think it's to about you and your relationship as opposed to the focus is on them. So if you start it first, right, you might be more likely to get them there. So don't hesitate to reach out for help if you need it. Your school systems can all help you do this. Most therapists can help you if you just go on Psychology Today. It's like a dating site for therapists. You just go on, pick somebody, reach out. They can help you figure out what your next step should be if they're the appropriate person and give you some referrals. Same thing with your pediatrician, by the way. They have a whole bunch of referrals. Okay, so here's some of my references. I'm going to wrap it up now. This is us. So, Herren Project, we have treatment and recovery services, we have family support services, we have prevention and outreach services. And we also have wave makers, which is how we generate our some of our funding to run these programs. If you are interested in more information, you could always reach out to me, Kristin, Kristin, at herrenproject.org, or go right on our website, which is herrenproject.org. And here's our contact information. So feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, you can just shoot them out here, or you can email me directly at Kristin@herrenproject.org. Okay, so let's see. Oh, there we go. I am trying to find my cursor to turn on my video. Okay, here we go. Can you guys all see me? Nope, I haven't stopped sharing yet. There we go. We're back. So it looks like we have a couple of questions and we have 4 minutes left. So perfect. I have a question. How to help grandparents that are raising tweens? All the same, whether you're the grandparent, the parent, the teacher, it's all what we talked about today. It's just trying to figure out how to be a non-judgmental, safe space for them. And grandparents can go reach out for some grandparent coaching too. Like you are acting as a parent, you need the support. There's also some support groups out there for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren now. So that can be very helpful. I should have mentioned that earlier. Peer support is amazing. So getting professional, if you're really struggling, getting some professional help and also reaching out for some peer support, some peer help. Okay, and my son has been struggling and came to me to talk. We had an open conversation for a while. I could check in with him and we were doing great, but all of a sudden they've become closed off now. I feel like I'm bothering them. Should I leave them alone or continue to check in even though it upsets them now, him now? I would say a combination of both. So I and go from the perspective of you. You shared with me that you're struggling and I'm concerned. I just want to make sure you're okay. You don't have to tell me anything. Um, but I want you to know I'm here and I love you. And then if that any questions irritate him, then stop asking questions and just use statements. I love you. I'm here if you need me. Right. I also would like to say the same thing I said earlier. Reach out for some help. Reach out for some support for you. It's really hard to be in this with a teen who's struggling with a mental health issue or substance use issue, whichever one it may be, reach out for some support. It's not all about them. You need it too. It's a very, very, very difficult place to be. So I'm sorry you're in this place. Hopefully it's a phase for him and he'll find his way back. Right? That happens frequently, but get the support that you need to help yourself through it. Okay, you guys, thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here with me today. I appreciate all of you. And if there were any questions that we didn't get to or that you were afraid to ask or that come to you later, please you feel free to email me. Again, Kristen, Kristin, at herrenproject.org is my email. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today.